In this episode, you'll discover what the ideal range of boats should be in your club fleet.
Feel the grip of the oar handle, smooth yet firm in your hands. Taste the salt of your own sweat and the occasional splash of water. It's all part of the journey. Welcome to another episode of Faster Masters Rowing Radio. Each week, our host, Masters rowing coach Rebecca Caro, dives deep into the world of Masters rowing. Whether you're on the water or in the gym, join us to become a faster master. Let's go rowing.
Hello, everybody, and it's good to be back again. Today, we're going to be talking about your boat fleet, the amount of boats that you've got in your clubhouse and whether or not they match your needs as a club group. Now, it's important to understand that many masters clubs inherited their boats, and you've got what you've got. And some of these boats are extremely elderly and maybe 20 and some years old, and some of them may be quite new. But at the end of the day, in order to have the club optimized, you need to match the weight of your athletes with the weight of the boat. Now, a simple starting point is just to assess your current fleet. Walk around your boathouse and have a clipboard and a pen. And most boats have a manufacturer's label, which is a little plate, usually in the bow seat. Sometimes it's on the front of the deck in the footwell. And on it, it usually says a serial number for the boat. It'll say the year it was built, and it'll say the weight that it was constructed for. As a general rule, the displacement in the water of the boat by the athletes is the calculation that the boat builders use to design boats. And most boat builders will tell you that we have 2 or 3 different molds for, let's say, a coxless 4 or a quad. And these molds will be slightly different to accommodate the greater displacement for heavier athletes than lighter athletes. Having said that, within each mold, there is variation that they can build in. So, for example, one of the things that they do differently, if you have a mold and you want to make a boat that is designed for a lighter crew than the average for that mold, what they do is they lower the deck. So that's the level platform that your seat and your slides sit on by about 5 mil, and that'll drop it by about 5 kilograms, I believe is a rule of thumb. The other thing they might do is lower the saxboards, but I don't think that's done so often nowadays, particularly with wing riggers, because the design of the mold has to include the flange on the side onto which a wing rigger mounts. So firstly, take a look at what you've currently got. When we did this survey, we also added another layer to it, which was we did all the 8, all the cox 4s and quads, all the coxless ones, doubles and pairs and singles. And then we also did an assessment of what their state of repair was, because some of them, politely, get thrashed to death. They are used a lot and abused a lot. Others are in okay nick, but they're very heavy because they've been repaired in the past. And remember, every time you get a ding in the hull and someone puts a little bit of filler in, adds a little bit of weight to the boat. So we've had boats which are extremely heavy, even though they actually row really nicely and they're in a good state of repair, as in the shoes aren't falling apart and the gates aren't worn and so on. So have a look at, we just did a low, medium, high kind of assessment. How good is the state of repair? And then the third thing you might want to do is to look at how frequently the boat gets used. So there are boats that are definite favorites that people request or get allocated frequently. Or in the case of our club, we have a large number of coxed quads that were bought in the days when there was a lot more coxed racing for young people. At the moment in New Zealand, all junior rowing, apart from singles and doubles, is in coxed boats. So we have coxed quads and coxed 4s, which get used for the juniors, but which typically the masters do not use. So they're boats that are taking up rack space that don't get very much use on a week-by-week basis. By contrast, there's a double scull that everybody loves. It just gets taken out over and over again. And so, you know, it gets worn out by use to some degree as well. And of course, the boats that get used more frequently are also the ones that are liable to get broken or dinged or whatever. So we then took a very close look at our membership, and we did an anonymous weight survey. Now, we chose to do this in kilograms because that is the metric that boat builders use for the boats that we buy. And we asked people to fill in a form anonymously just to say what their weight was. And we asked them if they were a man or a woman. This was really important. We discovered that we had fallen into the habit of talking about women's boats and men's boats. And after we'd done the weight survey, we found very clearly that this was inaccurate because we actually had roughly, we did 4 buckets of weights, people whose weights began with a 6, so we're in the 60 to 69 kilograms. Then we had 70 to 79, 80 to 89, and then over 90 kilograms. And we found that with the exception of the very lightest weight, we had both men and women in all of those groups. And so we had to consciously steer ourselves away from those words. And one of the other reasons for that is because masters do a lot more mixed racing than other groups in the rowing club. So although in our club group, the club can label a boat and say, this is a women's quad, or it is a quad that is allocated to the women's group. In the masters, we don't have fixed training groups that have fixed boat allocations that are theirs to use. And so as a consequence, our boats get used much more fluidly across a range of different genders, but also, as I said, mixed crews, because you could have a man and a woman who create an average of 75 kilos. You could also have 2 women that create an average of 75 kilos. So we did this anonymous weight survey. And what we found was a very interesting spread of need. We looked at 4 ranges of boat weight, and we looked at the percentage of our members who could row in those boats. Bearing in mind, because we average weights in boats, you could be a heavier person. You can still fit into a lighter boat if your crewmates are lighter and they bring the average down. So on the basis of that assessment, we found for 60 kilogram boats, we had 48% of our members, head count of our members, can fit into a 60 kilogram lightweight boat. For a 70 kilogram boat, which we called a mid-lightweight boat, we found 60% of our membership could fit into those. For an 80 kilogram boat, which we called mid-heavyweight, we found 44% of our membership could use those boats. And then for a 90 kilogram boat, which we called heavyweight, we found 23% of our membership could use those. And so you would expect a bell curve distribution, but our club is heavily skewed to female membership and also older females, and they tend to be smaller in height and lighter in weight. And so as a consequence, our bell curve peaks and skews heavily towards a 70 kilogram average. Now, this obviously creates a tension because there's a need when planning our fundraising and our boat replacement plan and our boat maintenance plan, as in which boats are we going to pay maybe to refurbish so that we can keep them in active use. We favor a slightly lighter average weight, around 60% of our members are in the 70 kilogram average. So you can see now that we've got some real data that we can then act on in order to decide what we're going to do with the boat fleet that we've got. Now, there were some reactions and observations from very experienced members of the club who came up with some really useful things that we needed to consider when making a purchasing plan. One was the resale value of boats, because not all clubs buy a boat and keep it forever. It's not necessarily like a car. Some prefer to buy a boat, keep them for a few years, and then sell a boat in order to then purchase new boats. And definitely resale value is a really, really important factor. And of course, it's not just about how well preserved the boat is or how old it is. It's also about who wants to buy that boat, because it's a market, supply and demand come into play. In New Zealand, there is a very high resale value for coxless quads, mainly because the highest volume of quad boat that is available for sale is a coxed quad, because the high schools and junior rowing use those. So there are very few coxless quads that ever come on the market. So if you've got a coxless quad to sell, you will probably sell it. By contrast, it was pointed out that if we had a 60 kilogram, say, double scull, that there are very few people who are clubs who would choose to buy that, because they don't tend to buy boats like that, because lightweight rowing as a racing class is being phased out. Having said that, private owners, totally lots of people in that weight class who might want a second-hand double scull. But you've got to consider the market if you're going to sell boats. Secondly, we spoke to the boat builders, and they told us what size of boat they typically build. And one of the observations that we made from that is a little bit like ladies' clothes sizes or bra sizes. There's been inflation in them, and what used to be a size 12 is now still a size 12, but fits somebody who might actually previously have been a size 14 in women's clothes. We think there is a little bit of boat weight inflation going on, and that boats that are classified at a particular weight actually now have a much bigger range of athletes that they will fit. For example, I own a pair double, and when we row it as a pair, we have the gates all the way down. We have to have them at the lowest possible setting. We also have to raise our seats up, because we cannot keep the blades covered under the water at the finish. So that's a sure sign that our athlete weight, the sum of the two of us in the boat, aren't sitting the boat low enough in the water so that we can hold the blades under the water. So to make that boat was bought as a 70 kilo boat. We know that the mould average, remember I talked about how boat builders can flex around their mould. That mould average was 72.5 kilos. And I suspect a little bit of weight inflation has gone on there. It's not a disaster. We can accommodate it. But we think the same thing happens across the board. Therefore, if you know what you actually weigh, you might want to be a little conservative when buying a boat and specify it, so that when you have an average weight crew, so let's say it's an 80 kilo boat, you have two people who net out to 80 kilos each in the boat, you want the oarlocks to sit halfway up the pins so that you've got washers underneath and above them. Now, as a general rule of thumb, most boat builders will take an average boat and will specify that that boat is suitable for people who are plus and minus 10 kilograms. Now, that's quite a lot when it comes to boats and people sitting in them. What it means in general is that if you have an 80 kilo boat, a 70 kilo pair of people can row it and a 90 kilo pair of people can row it. Now, I think personally that is an exaggeration. I prefer to specify around a plus or minus 5 kilos, because then it fits quite neatly into those weight ranges, which you remember I said earlier were 60, 70, 80 and 90. So if you have an 80 kilo boat, it goes down to 75 and up to 85. And the 90 kilo boat goes down to 85 and up to 95. Now, that might just be neat in terms of understanding who it's suitable for. But if you're too heavy in a boat, you don't have enough freeboard to take your blades out of the water square. If you are too light for a boat, you find that you're rowing too high, like you'll be pulling your finish up higher and higher up your chest, and you can't keep your wrists level with your elbows, which is a prerequisite for being able to get the oars out of the water smoothly and easily. So think closely about the issues of secondhand and resale value, as well as what you specify. Having said that, we went and had a little sneaky look at the boats that were in the adjacent bay of our boathouse, which are owned by our local girls' high school. And we found that their newest 8 was a 65 kilo average, which in all likelihood does reflect the average weight of 17, 18, 19-year-old girls who are rowing. And so we think there is a resale market for boats in the 60 to 69 kilogram range. Of course, when you do your athlete weight survey, there are always people right out at the outliers. We have a notable number of people who are between 50 and 59 kilograms, and they're rowers, not coxswains. And so, for them, they are always going to be rowing in boats that are not the right size for them in an average club. And sadly, that might be one of those facts of life, like the shoes never fit is another fact of rowing life. But I think there are some things that you can do to make sure that they have a good chance of rowing in a boat that does suit them. So take a look at your club fleet, take a look at the weights of your athletes, have an understanding of the number of years you use a boat before you replace it, and the number of new or new to you secondhand purchases that you might get each year, and then start to plan a replacement strategy for your boats that enables you to have the right range of boats for what you typically put on the water. For our club, we typically put quads out a lot. So our goal is to have a quad in each of those weight ranges so that we can boat cruise appropriately. And then you've got the outline of a plan of what you can do this year, what you might be able to do next year, and what your ideal is. Never forgetting, as our previous treasurer always said, this club has champagne tastes on a beer budget. And I suspect yours will be the same. Till next time.
We are part of the Rowing Chat Podcast Network. Please tell your fellow rowers about the show. If you've learned just one helpful thing from today's episode, please consider supporting the show for as little as $1 per month by visiting fastermastersrowing.com/podcast.